Welcome in, everyone, to the Week 5 edition of my Fantasy Football Favorites and Fades here on Fantasy Football for the People. My name is Ryan Larison, writer for Yards Per Fantasy, Rotoballer, and a part of the expert consensus of rankers over at fantasypros.com. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and like and share this video. Helps me out a ton here as I start my first year on YouTube. Before we get into this week's favorites and fades, I always want to be transparent whether I'm right or wrong with the calls that I make the week prior. So we're going to go back and look back at my week 4 favorites and fades, see which ones were hits, see which ones were misses, and then discuss real quickly what we learned from the matchup and how their performance was. Week 3 was not great for me, had less than a 50% hit rate, but we bounced back last week in week 4, so we'll dive right into those right now. Starting off with the favorites. Quarterback Brock Purdy, he was the quarterback 11 last week. That was a hit. Purdy was a top. Purdy is now has 3 finishes inside the top 15, with 2 of them being a QB1 finish out of 4 weeks. He is a top tier streaming option, no matter the defense that he plays, especially when he is able to face off against a poor defense in a plus matchup. Running back James Cook, that was a hit. He was the RB13. Cook is matchup proof at this point, and he's going to end the year as one of the RB steals of the draft, most likely, as long as he continues the pace that he's on. RB Damian Pierce, he was the running back 16. That was another hit. Still, I'm not the biggest fan of him this year, but he should continue to see big workloads and provide RB2 value. He may be a sell high at this point right now if you're looking for some better running back help. The Broncos wide receivers, all of these were misses. None of these wide receivers were even able to hit inside the top 30, even though Russell Wilson threw 3 touchdowns last week. I think better days are ahead for some of them, but there's a lot of tough matchups on deck for Denver in the receiving core, so it's going to be tough to recommend them as a start moving forward. Wide receiver Nico Collins, massive hit. He was a wide receiver 3 last week. He is a locked-in wide receiver 2 on a weekly basis moving forward. His counterpart, however, Tank Dell, big miss. He was a wide receiver 77, had just 3 targets last week. But I think he's still a solid flex option. He's got the potential to explode any week of the season. Does not matter the matchup, but you want to make sure that you throw him in those games that you think it's going to be more of a shootout rather than a back and forth matchup or a defensive struggle. And then finally on my favorites list, Darren Waller, big miss, tight end 27. Daniel Jones just needs time to throw, man. None of those options in the passing game are going to succeed unless he's able to start having more than a half a second in the pocket. Better days are ahead for Waller for sure, but they've got to capitalize on some of these plus matchups going forward if they're going to pay off for fantasy. Moving on to my fades, quarterback Dak Prescott, second time he's been a fade this year, and second time it's been a hit. He was a QB19, another week, 4 straight weeks outside of the top 15, and now he gets to play San Francisco on Sunday night this week. Not going to be starting Dak anytime soon. RB Brian Robinson, that was a miss. He was the RB15. Honestly, I watched the entire game. This one panned out until he got that sneaky touchdown on the 8-yard run. Had he not had that touchdown, this would have been a hit. But otherwise, I was not really impressed with his outing against Philadelphia. Something to watch moving forward as he has tough matchups. If he can bail himself out with a touchdown, that's great. He's not going to be able to do that every single time he's got a tough matchup. Running back Rachaad White, RB20. I'm going to consider that a miss as well. He finished inside the top 20. New Orleans offense being putrid and trying to throw a broken Derek Carr out there this past week helped contribute to some success for the run game for the Bucs last week. But he's getting all the touches that you can possibly imagine for a running back in Tampa Bay, so he's still going to be an RB2 pretty much every single week with high upside in good matchups, low ceiling in bad matchups. Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 30. I'm going to consider it a hit only for the sole fact that the expert consensus had him inside the top 24 last week. He finished as a wide receiver 30. There's other players that I felt that were better starts than him. If you want to consider it a wash, I totally understand since he finished as a wide receiver 3 technically. Better days are ahead. This offense looked a lot better last week against the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. So hopefully Garrett Wilson can continue to ramp it up and get better for fantasy managers. Quentin Johnston, big hit, wide receiver 89. He got up to that 50% snap share point like I said he might. He turned it into 1 catch on 3 targets. You got to fade him until he's a lot more involved with target share rather than just snaps on offense. And then finally, tight end David Njoku. This was a hit. He was the tight end 17. Feel bad for him. He had that fire accident before the game. Came in looking fantastic with the mask get up on. Looked scary. It didn't pan out. He had great target share with the Browns rookie under center. It just did not pan out for David Njoku. So I went 8 for 13 this week, over a 60% hit rate. So let's see if we can continue that trend of success going into week 5, where we are going to start with my favorites of the week. Quarterback CJ Stroud going up against Atlanta. Stroud has finished as a QB 13 or higher in each of the past 3 weeks. He has thrown 2 touchdowns 3 straight weeks in a row, and he has went for over 20 fantasy points in 4-point scoring formats in the past 3 weeks as well. In short, he's been a fantastic fantasy player, and he should continue to have success against Atlanta's defense. Falcons are middle of the pack right now against fantasy quarterbacks, but they are tied for the 8th most touchdowns allowed through 4 weeks of the season. Stroud is a top-tier streaming option in week 5, and he will be in consideration pretty much every single week moving forward, especially if he can continue to succeed in matchups that aren't top 10 matchups for fantasy quarterbacks. So if you got him, I suggest throwing him in depending on what your other options are. Moving on to the running back position, Aaron Jones at Las Vegas. People are very disappointed in Aaron Jones after last week's, I think it was 6-touch performance where he had like 2 fantasy points in certain formats, less than that in standard formats. It's time for that bounce back game for this week for the veteran. Did little to nothing in his return from a hamstring injury last week, like I mentioned. But now that they've had that mini bye week, he should be fully healthy, ready to go, see a massive workload against this Las Vegas defense that struggles against the run and the pass. Jones was the RB1 overall in week 1 against Chicago on just 11 touches. So we know that he hasn't really lost a step for fantasy purposes. He's just still recovering from the injury, and now he should be back to full health. Las Vegas gives the 12th most fantasy points per game allowed to the running back position, and they give up 5.5 receptions per game to the position as well. That plays right into Aaron Jones's strengths as a pass catcher. If there were ever a better get-right matchup for the Packers and offense in general and Aaron Jones, it's Monday night against the lowly Raiders defense. So if you got him, fire him up with confidence. Don't be too worried about last week's performance. Moving on to Breece Hall at Denver. The Breece Hall redemption tour starts in week 5 against Denver. For those who thought that the week 3 romping the Dolphins put on the Broncos defense was a fluke, they were dead wrong. Bears offense was humming in week 4, even in a losing effort against Denver. Now Hall has been given the green light by the coaching staff. They said that his touches are no longer going to be reduced or held back. He's going to be on a full workload, no longer limiting him after he's recovering from his season-ending injury from last year. And Denver is quite literally the best possible matchup for fantasy running backs this year. Hall is a must start in week 5. If you have him, you have to throw him into your lineups. He could be the RB1 overall on the week, and that is not a hot take. Now let's move on to the wide receiver position. Michael Pittman going up against Tennessee. I'm going to admit I had my doubts about the Indianapolis offense before the regular season started, but they have well exceeded my expectations through 4 weeks. Michael Pittman, he has been really hit or miss through the first 2 games of the season, but he's seen 11 or more targets in 3 of his 4 games so far this year. Last week, he just had 1 catch on 5 targets for 15 yards. So that was his worst outing of the season. We're not expecting that every single week. Wide receivers, even of Michael Pittman's caliber on his offense as the clear top target, are going to have down weeks. This is the bounce back matchup that you want. Tennessee gives up the 9th most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position so far this year. And the only week that they had that was good was against broken Joe Burrow last week. So this is the team that you want to target with your fantasy wide receivers, and I expect a big bounce back game for Pittman this week. He has top 12 upside for week 5. Second wide receiver start of the week. Moving on to Romeo Doubs at Las Vegas. We're going back to this Las Vegas game. While Christian Kirk is back and ready to roll for Green Bay, Romeo Doubs has been the clear top target for Jordan Love over the past 4 weeks, 25 targets over the past 2 weeks, and 3 touchdowns on the season. it makes him a must-start option in plus matchups like this one against Las Vegas. I fully expect Christian Watson to be a good play this week for fantasy, but that should not make you stray away from Romeo Doubs in week 5. Las Vegas gives up the 11th most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position, and they are tied for the most touchdowns allowed to the position. So Doubs, who has had an easier time finding the end zone this year through 4 weeks than anyone probably thought, this is the matchup you want to fire him up. He is the wide receiver 17 overall so far this year, and he should remain in lineups pretty much always unless proven otherwise. And then we're going to move on to our final favorite of the week at the tight end position, Zach Ertz versus Cincinnati. The panic really set in for those who grabbed Ertz off the waiver wire in week 3 when Ertz put up a whopping 2 targets and didn't really do anything with them. Those fears should have now been quelled after the veteran saw 8 targets or more in every other game so far this season, and he got back on track last week. Cardinals are fighting for their lives every single week, and quarterback Josh Dobbs is not going down easy in any of these matchups, no matter who it is that they're going up against. This week's matchup is perfect for Ertz to be able to exploit. The Bengals give up the 4th most fantasy points per game to the tight end position and have only forced 4 incompletions to the position all season long. That lines up perfectly for Ertz, who is normally peppered with targets. 3 out of 4 times this season, he's seen at least 8 or more. Ertz could see his first touchdown of the season in this game as well. So this is the weekend that you want to be able to throw him in there. Expect a decent baseline. He's got a high ceiling because of the matchup against Cincinnati. And now we're going to move on to my fades for week 5, starting with quarterback Russell Wilson. As bad as the Broncos have been this season, Russell Wilson has done just fine for fantasy purposes. He's a quarterback 9 overall so far this year. He has just 2 turnovers and 2 games of 3 or more touchdowns thrown. He's doing well. However, this is not the matchup that I want to personally stream him in. The New York Jets just handed Pat Mahomes one of his worst games statistically in his career, and they rank 11th in points per game to the quarterback position. On top of that, they allow just 5 passing touchdowns so far through 4 weeks. They have 5 interceptions. They rank 4th in total interceptions this season. And Wilson, he could have a nice fantasy performance if he's able to throw 3 touchdowns again. But I'm not banking on him being able to have a multi-touchdown game this week, especially against the Jets. I want to find other options if possible, and there should be quite a few on waivers, especially this week. Moving on to the running back position, Rhamondre Stevenson versus New Orleans. Personally, I believe the bounce back for Rhamondre is coming very soon. It's just not going to happen this week. Stevenson has seen the work he needs to succeed for fantasy. He's got 15 carries per game, seeing plenty of targets, and he's averaging nearly 70% of the snaps. That's great. However, he's been incredibly inefficient, just 2.7 yards per carry. The upcoming schedule is fantastic for Stevenson, and I think that he is a trade for target. You can even go after him after this week, especially if he has a poor performance like I think that he will. But this week is just not the week that I want to throw Rhamondre out there and expect a top 15 week from him. Saints rank 6th in points per game allowed to the RB position, and they have not let one score this year, and whether it's on the ground or through the air. That's pretty impressive. Stevenson's ceiling is completely capped this week. I do believe better days are ahead. Keep him in mind as you look to make trades next week for week 6. We're going to move on to Tyler Allgeier going up against Houston. This one might seem obvious to some of you. However, I've seen plenty of Tyler Allgeier in starting lineups at the running back position, at the flex spot over this past week as I've been prepping all of my fantasy lineups. And I understand that there's bye weeks starting this week. However, it's time to stop playing Tyler Allgeier like he is a flex option. He is nothing more than a handcuff at this point. Since his big game in week 1, Allgeier snaps have dropped every single week, with last week ending at 26%. Bijan's just taking over. It's what we thought was going to happen to start the year. It just took 4 weeks to get to this point. He's been horribly inefficient for the past 3 weeks, and he's made fantasy managers frustrated as all hell, especially since he's not finding the end zone. The matchup against Houston is awesome. I'm not going to deny that. I understand people wanting to throw him in the flex, but I think it's more of a trap than anything else. This is a big Bijan game, most likely. not a big Tyler Allgeier game. I would find a different flex option if you could this week. Moving on to the wide receiver position, we got George Pickens going up against Baltimore. Pittsburgh's offense is an absolute dumpster fire this season, and it's affected George Pickens the most. Even as the clear top target for Kenny Pickett, Pickens is the wide receiver 36 through the first month of the season, and he has just one finish as a top 36 option or better. That's it. The matchup against Baltimore looks pretty good on paper. Problem is Baltimore's been banged up the past 3 weeks, and now they're getting Marlon Humphreys back in week 5, one of the top corners in the NFL. Pickett's also dealing with a knee injury. Maybe that means Trubisky comes in and is better for George Pickens, but we don't know that for sure. And there's a good chance that Pickett finds his way out on the field and tries to gut through this injury, making me completely off of any Steelers pass-catching weapon this week. Bench him if you can. I think better days might be ahead for Pickens, but this is not the week to bet on that happening. Second wide receiver fade of the week, Jeudy going up against the Jets. Going back to this Jets game with the Broncos passing attack, it's been a completely disappointing 3 weeks for Jeudy. He misses the first week of the season due to an injury, starts to come back and ramp up his production. He's had 3 phenomenal matchups for fantasy wide receivers, and he's ranked outside the top 45 twice, and his highest finish has been wide receiver 33 against the poorest Miami pass defense. The target share has been mediocre at best. 7 targets has been his max. He's hit 5 a couple of times and not gone over that in 3 weeks. And now he gets to go up against Sauce Gardner and the Jets secondary. The Jets rank 3rd in points per game allowed to the wide receiver position and have given up just 1 touchdown through 4 games all season. With so many other options seeing targets in Denver and Jeudy underperforming, you need to bench him this week if it's possible. His schedule over the next month is very, very tough. It's brutal for the entirety of the wide receiver core in Denver, not just Jeudy. So this could be a theme moving forward of keeping him on your bench. And then we're going to get to the last fade of the week, which is tight end Kyle Pitts going up against Houston. And this is more of a PSA than anything else because I'm still seeing Kyle Pitts in lineups all over the place. I know he's talented. We all know he's talented. He can ball. He's a great tight end, more of a wide receiver playing a tight end position. But you got to stop putting him in your fantasy lineups. Jonnu freaking Smith is the tight end 10 overall this season, and he's seeing an average of 7 targets per game. I don't know if I need to tell you any more than that. Not only is Pitts a tight end in a timeshare, but now he is a tight end in one of the lowest pass offenses in the NFL, and he hasn't been good for fantasy football since last year when he went to London and scored a touchdown one game. The name value and the hope that he is going to pop off and be this amazing fantasy asset is the only thing that is keeping him in lineups for people. I understand the draft cost that you sunk into the guy. I understand that we all know that he is a talented player. He is not going to work in this offense. It's time to cut bait. Houston is a phenomenal matchup. I don't care. I don't want to play him in any matchup, in any game. He's not getting enough work. He's not getting enough targets, and he's in a timeshare. Bench him. Drop him for another option in redraft leagues. Do what you got to do. I don't think you're going to regret it, but don't start him. Not now and not ever until we see it. And that is going to be it for my week 5 favorites and fades, guys. Thank you again for watching. I appreciate everyone that watches these videos, likes, shares, and subscribes to the channel, especially over the past month. You guys have helped me grow a ton. Nothing but positive reception so far, and I appreciate everyone that's watching. So catch us on Thursdays for our live Q&A with my brother, Matt Larison. Of course, Saturdays, the favorites and fades always go up at about 8 a.m. EST. And then I've got the shorts coming out on Fridays and Saturdays, both on my TikTok and on YouTube and my Facebook page. So make sure you check those out. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today, and I will see you next time.